All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Everything They Don't Want You to Know. It's me, Jesse Blaze Snider, the coolest geek alive. If you listen to my other podcast, Coolest Geek Alive, every Wednesday and Saturday, I do geek culture shit. Love geek mythology. Really feel like that is the one religion of the future myth, and it's the best way for us all to communicate in the same language, and it breaks down barriers between religion and other things. And I've always felt that way about entertainment and music. Every Monday I do a show called All Your Favorite Bands Suck. If you're a music fan, I break down one of my favorite bands that I feel like isn't really talked about enough. Although eventually I'm going to get to some of these bands like the Beatles and shit that are talked about plenty. But and there's all sorts of genres: comedy music and punk music and metal and rap and all sorts of things. Anyway, I love you. Thank you for listening to my show. We're living in such an interesting time now where all of these things that I've known about, I want to explain this to you. I had this conversation with my girlfriend the other day. You know, when it comes to life and reality and all these things, people have this sort of locked-in mentality until they've had certain experiences that they don't know. And nobody knows, and everybody just is like offering a philosophy to them of some kind. I want to tell you that, one, I don't feel like I'm teaching, because this is information that's been passed on to me, and I'm passing it on to you, and I understand it from a very visceral place because, for lack of a better word, I was enlightened. You know, very much for me, the big activator was the first time I did mushrooms, and I was 29 years old. I did magic mushrooms because Steve Jobs recommended that basically he said if not for an LSD trip in college, he would not have invented Apple computers. And I was a huge fan of his and the way he thought. And I took that to heart. I started taking marijuana medicinally at 28, and I had a lot of success with it. It really helped me figure out a lot of things, made me realize I was operating from like this anxiety perspective all the time. And at that point, I opened myself to, well, maybe I should take Steve Jobs' advice. I'd always planned to do that eventually, so I was less scared to do it. And when I did it, I was very much enlightened in an instance. In an instance, I knew things, and I want to, try to impart this to you, and to some degree, I think it's kind of silly, like what I'm imparting, because it's sort of so obvious. But this is the genesis of everything. The genesis of everything, as we've talked about in earlier episodes of the show, is mind. Everything that we exist in is a concept. The ground and our bodies and separation and solidity and liquidity and like every single thing is a concept. And you could remove certain concepts from reality and make a more simplified reality, and you could rearrange things, and you could make it so that things were opposite the way they were. There's a lot of switches you could flip on the way reality is being done, from gravity on down, and what your body's breathing, and how the symbiosis between animals is working. You could just remove predators from the whole fucking equation, etc. Well, herbivores are still predatory creatures, predating on plants, which are very much sentient. But I'm just demonstrating different ways that you could think about concept, okay? So when you realize that everything is concept, okay? And, for me, I had a visceral experience where I recognized everything was concept. Without having that visceral experience, this may be slightly hard for you to accept, but there are plenty of people who have had these experiences, and there are plenty of writings that play exactly into everything that means, this concept thing. Everything that I'm trying to teach you with these universal laws and these things that you would learn if you were a Mason or in the Illuminati or whatever, these are all aspects of this conceptual world that we live in. But you are capable of sort of like figuring it out on your own, okay? Imagine for a moment you are a mind that gets booted up, right? Like, and even if you thought of, like, you were like paralyzed and like stuck in a bed and couldn't move and whatever else, like, what would you do? Would you invent worlds for yourself? Would you have conversations with yourself? Would you eventually, in desperation, if you lived forever, would that eventually happen? And I'm just being silly and saying like it's like not a real understood thing, because this raw consciousness that's not limited in the way that our minds are limited by the strappings of time and space and everything else that's here on planet Earth. This mind can conceptualize everything in sort of a blink of an eye, and it's like a stacking. And today we're learning about the law of cause and effect, which is one of the universal laws. But ultimately, the thing that they don't want you to know, because I try to boil these laws down to like specifically, well, why wouldn't they want them to know that? And it really comes down to prayer and the way the world works. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. But so all these things stack up in this cause and effect sort of thing. The way I've laid out these universal laws to you in after the introductory episode, the first like seven episodes have all been like these laws, the way I see them, the way I've ordered them. And it's because of a bit of a cause and effect. I did like a cause and effect thing. There's a cause, which is there's this nothing, and eventually this nothing gives rise to something, and this something is conceptual. It's consciousness. It's basically giving rise to a part of itself that is aware of itself, and then begins to process and think, what else could it be? What else could it imagine? What shapes, what sizes could it grow? What if it split itself into another piece so that it could talk to itself and communicate with itself? So there's a really interesting and simple thing that you can sort of do as a being to process, if I were a consciousness, how would I create reality? And there's a pretty simple thing, sort of that comes from this, of like, the consciousness that is aware of itself and is aware of the fact that it is the creator, even if it's just a spark of the creator, a split of the creator, maybe it's a half, a fraction, whatever it is on down, it's all a portion of the creator, and it is doing a certain amount of creating in the universe. You are creating your reality. I am creating my reality. We are all creating within this reality. We're also contributing to other people's realities in ways, sometimes in terrible ways, where we've gotten ourselves into people's heads and, we're making them feel bad. Sometimes we've gotten ourselves into people's heads and we're making them feel good. I like to think that my buddy Aaron Sparrow is one of my best friends. He and I work on comics together. We've been friends for years and years. And, and Aaron, like me, has struggled with depression and, suicidal thoughts kind of thing. And Aaron's gotten, has been a little bit more serious about it than I ever was. But I've certainly felt it very hard. But I have kids and whatnot. And, and I always try to fill my buddy's brain with as many wonderful things as I can, because I think them, and I think he's wonderful, and I want him to know, and I want him to have that in his head when he goes to bed at night and wakes up in the morning. He starts to think some shitty thing about himself, and maybe he remembers that Jesse said, "No, you're awesome, and you're funny, and you're witty, and you're cool, and and any fucking lady who would find you would be a great what are the things that you tell your friends? And why do you do that? Because you want to be that positive influence. Because on some level you understand that we're in this collective consciousness, that people are putting little seeds of doubt in people's heads. And when it's somebody that you love, you want to put all the seeds of righteousness and seeds of yes, and you can do it. So, coming from a place of knowing that you are the creator and recognizing something that's hard for us to recognize down here, that you can have anything you want. Granted, there may be things that you can't have. There may be lessons that you need to learn. There may be delays on things. There may be timings on things. But in general, anything that you could want, you're sort of meant to have. Sometimes you have to go through a process to get to them, to learn the things that are keeping you from them. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. For me, I have some notes on some of my personal anecdotes of my life, my career, ways in which I saw that this was true. But to create your reality in knowing that you can create anything, and that not largely, but that God is on your side, that you're a part of God, that you've made a plan of action, and this is containing a whole bunch of things. And you go, how do I know that? And how do I know? Well, this is true, and there's a lot of different people who will break this down for you, and I will end up breaking this down for you a million different times over the course of this show. But right now, I'm just breaking it down in action. From the godly place, you know that you are the creator. You've entered into a place where there's certain things that you don't know, so that you can be surprised. There's a device that you used to be able to put on the cartridge Nintendos. The original Nintendo was called, it was the Game Genie. I think they had one for the Super Nintendo too. You put the Game Genie onto the thing, and then you had this book of codes that you could put into various games that would give you kind of powers and whatnot within the game. So I put in Mario Brothers, which had been a challenging game for me as a younger kid or whatever. I was maybe like 11 or 12 or 13 at the most or something. And maybe I was even younger than that, actually. And I remember putting in the code for Moonwalk. And the Moonwalk basically made it so that every piece of jump in the air, it was like a step, and you could just like jump up into the sky if you just kept hitting the jump button. You just jump. So you would jump from the front of the board, and you'd go jump, and then you'd fall down at the end of the board onto the flag, and then you go to the next level and you go jump, and you would never be in any danger, and you beat this game. Jump. You got to do like some fireballs or whatever, but also you're jump. Bowser can't shoot his fire up there. Jump. And you finish the game, and you're like, I'm never gonna play that game again. The game fucking sucks. Because it was so easy. And, and that's part of this thing here with this godly, this decision to not remember certain things. Granted, I don't believe we're supposed to be brought in here blind and not remember who we are and be told that we're living in this limited reality where 2 + 2 is 4. Yes, to some degree. But we're living in a consciousness. And in a consciousness, a reality created by a mind, ultimately anything is possible. Anything can happen. Whether it's happened yet or not. The possibilities are here within this reality, and they are huge. What is possible? Most people are living in a reality that is super duper tiny, of what is possible. It's insane, the reality that I live in, to some degree. I think, most people would be like, what is this? These things that you think are possible? But anything is possible. And I think a lot of people are really scared of sort of that word anything, infinity. You can't quite wrap your head around it. And it's cool because it's like, I can't begin to think about all the things that are possible. I just know that I don't have to limit myself. And, some things may be possible only under certain circumstances at the moment or in certain places or whatever. But ultimately, we're living in a reality that is upgrading itself over time. We're living in a reality that unfortunately fell in its vibration. This is what they talk about in the Bible, the lower vibration. There were some things that happened, and whether it was the laying with, more higher beings, laying with lesser beings, and maybe being sort of infected vibrationally with some of their weaknesses of their soul. I don't know exactly how this shit really breaks down, but conceptually, the angels fell, and this is just higher vibrational beings fell into lower vibrations. We've been in lower vibrations. We're moving into a higher vibration. We've been in this third vibration, which is like, sort of a kill or be killed sort of thing. And now we're moving into this fourth vibration, which is a love vibration. The fifth vibration is a balancing of that love sort of thing. I have a couple things that I might mention later about some of that as well. Like I said, I have some notes, but I like to just kind of talk about what I'm feeling when I come onto the show to begin with and get out some of the ideas that are bubbling to mind. So I am the fifth dimension balances the love vibration, because apparently in the fifth dimension, after this love thing, there's still like a problem where sometimes people are self-sacrificing and being too rough on themselves because of trying to love other people or be caring towards other people. So it's like, okay, good, but like it goes internal. And I've been dealing with a lot of those internal things of like beating myself up and going through those fifth dimensional lessons, learning to stop tormenting myself or whatever, as the fifth dimension is wont to do. But on the other side of this is the creative dimension, the sixth dimension. And you can study dimensions another day. I mean, this is the cause and effect and prayer bit, so I want to eventually get to that stuff. But we are living in a mind, and it's layered with all sorts of dimensions of perspective on itself, perspectives on consciousness. The perspective that we hold is the perspective that we need to hold to have a life here, to be present conceptually here. Over the years, I've worked spiritually with ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms, and a lesson that I've been shown over and over again is sort of, us, the ways in which we create our reality. I guess I'll tell you a couple stories. One time, when I do this, I will meditate for 2 to 3 hours on a very high dose of medicine. Ayahuasca, it's a whole different thing, but if I do the mushrooms, and this was a mushroom experience when I did this, so I'll take the mushrooms, whether I have a tea or just, swallow them, chew them up, swallow them. And I'll, give it kind of half an hour kind of thing, do something I like, put myself in a good mood, and then I'll go to meditate. And as the mushrooms will kick in, I will have insane experiences. Things that I think would break a lot of people's minds. I'm very open conceptually to things, and so often I find myself going, okay. Wow, like, I know a lot of people who would not like to hear this. I guess that's really, what you learn sometimes. But in this case, I was meditating in bed, and I opened my eyes because I was being sort of taught something about perspective and concepts, and that I recognized things, like they were showing me the fan, and I was looking at the fan, and they were going, you see this fan here? Look at it. You see it, and you see it largely because you recognize so many of the components of the fan, from the fan blades and, this little ball chain thing that's down here and, and it's hanging from the ceiling in the center of the thing. And you have a concept that's, a fan and where the fan goes and, and it's, obviously on a rotor, it's, got a rotating device of some kind. And you could recognize that because you've seen that before. You know what this is. But if you didn't really have a solid concept for what you were looking at, you wouldn't see it really, and at the very least you would see it in a very different way. And then all of a sudden they shut that part of my brain down. They turned that off, and the fan I couldn't quite make it out anymore. It's not to say that, I couldn't see it. Something was there, but, I didn't get it. It was that simple. I couldn't tune into it. I didn't get it. And it was kind of not there. It was, vibrating in a dimension that I couldn't access conceptually. And it really spooked me out when this happened. And I remember getting up really quick and turning around because I got sort of a humana kind of thing, like a whoa, that's gnarly. And I turn around and I look at my pillow and the same thing that just happened to now the thing that I don't even fucking remember what it is, the fan, is happening to the pillow. And I don't know if I said it out loud or I just think, oh no, I like pillows. and I was just sort of oh fuck, I gotta get this together. Because then I sort of connect to the idea that I'm gonna forget my kids. I'm going to forget my wife. I think I was married at the time. And, I love those people. And then, I had an even bigger thing with my best friend, Aaron. And I thought about all these things. And it makes sense now that I brought up Aaron earlier. I thought about all these things, these hopes and dreams that I had for him. Belief that I had in him of what he could do, how fucking valuable he was as an intellect, just as a mind, as a creative person. He's a writer, he's an editor, but he's so much more than that. He's just a really wonderful human being, is just great with people and brings out the best in people, really is great at what he does. He and I do a lot of similar things, and he can do everything I can fucking do, man. He's a brilliant creative person, and I know that on some levels, he doesn't see that in himself or for himself. He's doing his own creator-owned comic book, and if you love my love for my friend, go to Kickstarter and you can sign up for it. It's Doomface. Kneel Before Doomface is the comic. I don't know when it's launching. It'll be launching in the next few weeks probably, but you can sign up for notifications. He deserves your time and attention. I've been an editor on this book. It's been great working on it, and happy to tell you to do that. So if you're hearing this, I love my friend. Go support my buddy. He deserves it. So in this fucking psychedelic experience, me seeing all these things that he's capable of, like doing his own comic book and fucking being a Walt Disney type, which is something I see for him, on whatever level, that I kind of know maybe he doesn't exactly see that for himself. I think he sees himself in a few respectable type ways, but I don't think he sees himself the way I do. And the way I see him was disappearing. And I was realizing that it would go with me. That I was the person who was holding these crazy possibilities in my mind for him. And that I had been holding crazy possibilities in my mind for all sorts of people. And that I was actually the one keeping the dream alive, keeping the hope alive for them in a lot of cases, because they weren't You know, it wasn't like they told me, think like this to help me. I just saw greatness. I see greatness in everybody, really, you know, on one level or another. And I think I'm somebody who just has a deeper appreciation of what greatness can be. And, I think my love for the Muppet Show, it comes from that. You know, I always wanted to be Kermit the Frog, being in a position to help my friends show their inner beauty in a variety of ways and be a part of it with them. You know? Just thinking about it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's going to make me cry. It's so lovely. So, my reality is shorting out. And I eventually basically pull myself back together from this. But it was sort of like harrowing. And I had a similar experience recently where I guess I sort of went through the path of consciousness, like I'm talking about here on the show, of what God, for lack of a better word, the infinite consciousness did to itself as a consciousness as it progressed. And basically it was sort of a splitting itself up into various parts. You know, this part's going to operate this thing and know this thing, and this part's going to be this part, and that part's going to be that part. And then the other end of it, sort of recapitulating and reconnecting to the pieces of the apparatus that we are and we always were, because that's what we were learning about, the thing that we are, and sort of coming back to oneness. So starting in this oneness, that's the nothing, and then into this consciousness, and then to this splitting of this consciousness, and then through into exploring ourselves in reality, into recapitulating as we come to see everything about this version of ourselves that we can. And in doing that, it was very visceral. I sort of was out of the thing. And I felt very viscerally how connected I was to everything. Like, if you see a whole bunch of hairs that folded in on themselves into a center spiral, and all the hairs were creating closeness to one another, right? So every hair was pointing in from the center of a cylinder. Maybe that would be the better analogy. I saw that I was pressed up against all of these other hairs, these other consciousnesses, and me being sort of gone or laid to rest was a very delicate operation, to say the least, of the connection of that I had to all things, which always seemed so. I'm not such a big deal, and yet I was this intricate piece of the thing. It was that was the thing, and I was this chunk of it. And we are all, a chunk of this thing, an important piece of this operation. And, the reason why I'm getting into all this and trying to teach you about this consciousness and the creating reality is because that's what you should have known coming in. This information should have been passed on to you when you came into this world. You should have had a basic idea of what reality was, and that you were a part of the creation of it and how that worked. Because not being taught that, we have fallen into a patterning of accidentally getting exactly what we're asking for because we don't know how to pray. And that is, where I want to start, in my notes today. This show is going to be called Prayer and the Law of Cause and Effect. Now, there's a great story that I heard a long time ago from just somebody on YouTube, but it so perfectly illustrated everything that I was
being shown and taught, and I thought in a much better way than I had been able to articulate it, and even it had been articulated to me in a way that I think really illustrates the point of prayer. And now, I want to tell you something about the rain dance. I was an atheist most of my life, for 28 years. 29 years. When I did mushrooms, that was when I went, I'm an idiot. Fuck. There's a lot more going on here. Fuck. That was a lot of my experience. And I was a little mad, too. I was like, who the fuck has been keeping this from me? It's very aggravating. Really elevated my consciousness in like an instance. And if you ever think about doing it, I recommend you do what I did. Spend a couple months reading about psilocybin. I picked psilocybin over not TLC, LSD. Sorry. Because LSD is synthetic and mushrooms weren't. I'd recommend listening to McKenna. What's his first name? Terrence McKenna, who's like a famous psychonaut of exploring with psilocybin mushrooms and whatnot. And don't get scared by anything about it. It's a mind thing. So always go in with a good attitude. Prepare yourself beforehand. Have the house clean and things like that taken care of and stuff. I mean, I've done a couple trips when things weren't perfect, and it just can put you into situations that I think would probably be scary for most people. I tend to handle it pretty good, but once or twice I've had like I wish I cleaned this place. It's yucky, or whatever. So you want to make yourself a nice conditions and, have some music that you like and maybe a movie that you like and things. But, explore doing it spiritually and, go into it looking for spiritual guidance. And I guarantee you will have a wonderful experience. Back to my friend Aaron, right after I had my very first psilocybin experience, how positive it was, I asked him if he would do it with me. I guess the next weekend. So a week later, I said it was the greatest experience of my life. Would you come do it with me? I'd love to share it with you. And I'm interested to do it with a friend. And I think it would be life-changing. And he said yes. But the day after we did it, I said, so what do you think? Was that right? Was it life-changing in any way? And he said, honestly, Jess, I wanted to hate it. I wanted to tell you, not for me, I gave it a try, but, never do that again kind of thing. And you were right. It was an extremely meaningful experience for me. And I don't know if I'll ever do it again. I may never do it again. But I'm glad I did it. And you were right. And if I can count the amount of times in my life that's happened, somebody goes, you were so right about this, and I wanted to doubt you, but fuck, you nailed it. And we had a wonderful time, and you learned a lot from it. And Aaron, to this day, occasionally will partake in magic mushrooms as well. Both of us have learned that it's a really good cure for depression, and both of us have suffered from a lot of depression in our lives. And it's been a tool that we've been able to use to uplift us and connect us spiritually and connect us to our faith and all these different things. So, yeah, what was I telling you about that ultimately? So, yeah, if you do it, take it seriously. But it's an incredible experience. And now, atheist Jesse thought that the idea of a rain dance was stupid. I have always been drawn to Native American culture, and I have had kind of the utmost respect for Native American culture. Now I know that it's because the terminology here is rough, but let's say in a more recent life or a life reminiscent of this one, where I was with the same souls, my mom and my dad and my brothers and my sisters. I was a Native American lady, and we were. I've come to find out and feel pretty deeply, and I knew this already, that our tribes wore Mohawk. The boys wore Mohawk haircuts, and I was drawn to the Mohawk haircut so hardcore when I was a kid. To some degree, it was the thing that made me feel like, I was a punk rocker as opposed to like this was my place where I felt safe. And to this day, I rock the Mohawk. And now I know that it's got like a deeper root into female me had come to appreciate the Mohawk as a sign of masculinity. And, and I guess they were boys that I liked who had Mohawks. So when I see the Mohawk, I'm like, yeah, I like that. And so, I put it up, and I remember I had a manager who wanted to get me away from the Mohawk. And then one day I put up the Mohawk and we went to some event, and she said, I think you should wear the Mohawk every time we go out. And I said, oh yeah, you're coming around to it? And she said, yeah, it's not my favorite hairstyle, but you just become a different person when you wear it. And I do. I like, I don't know. It turns me on. I like it. I like the Mohawk a lot. It's a very deep thing for me, this Mohawk connection. And there's other, things that I'm sure I'll get into one day or another from, some of those stories. But yeah, my family has some connections to our previous incarnation as a family. We have all sort of separately been able to discern a number of pieces of that story, which is cool. This is the type of things that can happen when you start opening yourselves up to the possibilities that this might be true. And I'm not talking about just like, a bunch of random stories that we told each other, like really visceral things that have affected us and that have lined up in eerie ways with our reality. Case in point, my brother Shane, who's done a lot of past life regressions and had a lot of success with them, really connecting very viscerally, connected to something that just, his personality and his heart, this story meant so much to him. And the short version of the story is that he woke up in a forest, and he's this Native American guy, and he thinks he's drunk. He can't figure out where he is. And finally, he puts his hand on his head because his head hurts. He's like, from being drunk. And when he pulls his hand down, he sees his hand's all red. He's bleeding. He's not drunk. He's injured and he's lost. And then wolves come and they eat him. And then he sees himself above his body, all mutilated by the wolves. And the wolves are gone, and now his mom and his dad are there, and there are these Native Americans, the chief and his mom and his brother, who ran to get help. My brother Cody had made at least 3 short films that all ultimately centered around the central theme of leaving somebody behind. Not being there for somebody when they needed you. And my brother Shane basically connected to sort of his feelings of resentment that he felt towards Cody and whatever, stemming from this moment, thinking that his brother had abandoned him before he died, and not being able to sort of reconcile that thing. And sometimes my brother Shane, I guess, feels not included or whatever else from my brother Cody, and these little torments from this past life that we only know about because of this. So anyway, there's plenty more where that came from, but I definitely have a connection to this culture, and I was like a medicine woman in that life. I thought rain dancing was the stupidest thing because, I kind of thought prayer was stupid, but I thought the dancing prayer was just even dumber. You know, what do you think? You're going to add a little dance to it? You're going to trick God into giving you what you want? You know, kind of thing? I was like, fuck, that's bullshit. And now I know the error of my ways. Especially from this story, from this guy. This guy went to the field where the crops were to do a rain dance, essentially, with the shaman. And the shaman went down to the field and took his shoes off. And he stood there for a long moment with his eyes closed, just kind of looking up, but, you know, with his eyes closed, breathing, you know, but nothing like crazy. And finally, he takes like a deep breath in and he opens his eyes and he turns to the man that, you know, he came with, you know, who thought he was here to do this rain dance. And he says, "I'm hungry. Let's eat." And the guy is confused. So they're walking back to the car and he's like, "I'm sorry, I'm confused. I thought, you know, we came here to, you know, pray for rain." And he says, "Oh no, pray for rain, you get more no rain." And the guy goes, "So what did you just do?" And he says, "I felt the moisture in the ground beneath my feet. And I imagined there was more. I saw the crops grown in full bloom. I saw my family happy as we harvested them. I saw us at a table with a great bounty of food before us, giving thanks for what I'm thankful for now. And I was so grateful that it had all already come to pass. Then I realized I was hungry. To pray, effective praying, is to visualize the outcome that you wish and to know that it is already yours because there is nothing in the way of it. Now, to fully understand this to its maximum and, you know, to the maximum of it as well, is to understand some of the intricacies of karma, and karma is even a bad word, you know, sort of there's a certain amount of things in your existence that are preordained for your benefit, for your growth. These things are going to be difficult for you to adjust because they were placed there like rocks as certainties for a reason. But within the context of everything else, the scale in which you can go, how much money you can have, or what you can do for a living, and what, you know, the sky is the limit. Everything is possible. You know, and there may be steps that you need to take in order to get smart enough to do the thing that you want to do, or get good enough to do the thing that you want to do, or get into the position to do the thing that you want to do. And the trick of it all is you don't know. You know, this was something I was saying to my brother the other day, and I was also saying to my girlfriend, you know, because every now and then the people around you, just like when you're trying to like teach stuff like this, it's like, you know, they think like you must be an egomaniac because you think that you can teach us things. I'm like, oh, no, not at all. I learned the shortcut, and it's definitely the thing, you know, like it's definitely a shortcut. And if you took it, you'd be like, yes. And now I'm like, let me tell you how to get it. It's totally a shortcut. I'm telling you, if you were in my body, you'd be like, I found the shortcut. Use this. And I've had those experiences where I went, oh, fuck. Okay, it's this other thing. It's this mind. It's this mind generating reality. What does that really mean? Okay, a lot of people have been looking at this before, there's a lot of concepts that really explain what this is about. If you can start exploring these concepts, you can start to understand what is it really like living in a mind. What can it be like when you know that you are a consciousness living in a body, in a reality created by a mind even larger than yours that you're a part of, and that you're in cooperation with this thing. All sorts of things. Now, I've got notes here, and I should, kind of get into them. So I can, begin to sort of, wrap up this conversation, because I can just kind of talk about these things for forever. Reality will match your vibration. So if you're praying for rain, you're essentially sending out a vibration of, and just think about this, if you could boil down your prayer to a vibration, if the vibration is, the universe, which is you, and you're creating it, goes right back at you. A rain dance and a good prayer is a what I need, it has come, it is here, all is right, all is bright, prayer is answered. Thanks, God. It is done. And the more you can believe it is done, the more it will be done. Bashar, who was a famous channeler of higher dimensional aliens, for lack of a better word, he said basically, if you say, oh, cool, you got a thing that you want to do. Think you could do that in 12 years? Oh, yeah, I could definitely do it in 12 years. Think you could do it in 10? Oh, yeah, I could definitely do it in 10. Think you could do it in 8? Yeah, I could do it in 8. Think you could do it in 5? Yeah, I think maybe I could do it in 5. That is the ceiling. 5 is now the ceiling of how long it's going to take. The moment where your doubt comes in of how much money you can get, what's possible. What's possible? Could money come to you somehow? There's no way that money could come to me somehow. If you truly believed it. And there could literally, I could tell you 1,000 ways in which you couldn't get money because you don't have any family and you don't play the lottery and the lottery's not even available where you are, and there's a million fucking reasons, and you don't have any friends, and like you've never even gone out of your house in weeks, and nobody knows you. Nothing could possibly happen, and then somehow you fall through a fucking hole in the floor, and there's money in the floor of your house. There's always a possibility that you can't see. But if you're open to the possibility and there's a need and a desire, or a real desire for you to have something, things can happen. Usually speaking, action has to be taken. Inspired action. But, the inspired action in some faithful lady who's at home in her house, and generally speaking, she doesn't really know how that could be possible, but she has faith. Pure fucking faith. Well, she trips and falls, whatever, and does the right thing, and that's how she falls, hits the thing. She took some inspired action within her life because she was living in that inspired way, and it led her into a fumble that crashed her into the floor, and she found that money. Reality will match your vibration. My brother Shane, I told this story I have a whole bunch of these lessons in YouTube with other things. There's a whole bunch of things in here that I talk about that I'm not going to talk about on here, that are on the lesson for cause and effect on YouTube. It's Blacklight District Studios. If you go to our YouTube and you just type in, or you don't have to go to our YouTube, you can just type in Jesse Blaze Snider, 13 Universal Laws, and the 13 Law playlist will come up, and you can check these things out at greater length. But my brother Shane had this experience where he was hallucinating, having an experience around a fire on ayahuasca, and he was talking to these guys that he described as hicks. And eventually they started being really racist. And he got fed up, and he stood up and he went, "You guys are a bunch of freaking racists. I'm getting the hell out of here. Fuck you guys." And he walked away from this hallucination of these guys at this bonfire. And he calls out to Mother Ayahuasca. He says, "Mother Ayahuasca, why you got me hanging out with these racist hicks?" And Mother Ayahuasca says, "You're the one who made them racist. You're the one who made them racist." His expectation of what a hick was brought that part of their personality out of them. Now, a great friend of mine once said that there is good people in every bad neighborhood and there's bad people in every good neighborhood. I like to say there's good in every bad person and there's bad in every good person. And you can expect to align yourself with either thing, because there's bad in every good person. If you expect bad situations to come, if you expect bad from people, you will get that from people. When I came to understand this, I decided that I was going to get the best out of Hitler and the best out of every Nazi and the best out of every bad guy that I could perceive at the time. Now I probably have a little bit more of a nuanced thought about, every guy that I imagine might be bad on some level. I think we're all just confused in our own different ways, various ways that we've been bred and led culturally. But on whatever level, I said, whatever bad part of anybody that might exist out there, I'm going to get the best of them. I'm going to always get the best of everyone, no matter what, because I know that there's good in every bad person and there's bad in every good person, and I'm always going to get only the best out of everyone. I'm going to always get them at their best and be a positive aspect of their life. I'm not going to be somebody they get into a fucking argument with about racism. I'm going to be somebody that makes them think twice about racism because they also judge tattoos and now they saw mine and I was nice and whatever. So the moment I pledged that in my life, I changed my life for good. It's probably my greatest success of my entire existence. And I'm going to take note of that myself as I say this out loud, as a spiritual person, was making the decision that I always get the best out of everybody. And recently I made a decision that I am infinitely wealthy. I have all the fucking money in the universe and there's nothing that I can't do. I can do everything and I know that it's coming to fruition, and it's been slowly coming to fruition, even though I could paint to you some 3D things that I'm going through right now that would say, well, Jesse, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And this hasn't changed. And I know you've been wanting that to change for a while and that to change for a while. You certainly haven't been in the position that you want. Yeah, but I know I've just changed my mind. And there's a lot of reasons why I allowed myself to change my mind, but ultimately they were just excuses for me to get to the place that you need to get yourself to, of pure faith and understanding of the things that you want. Because you're a creator who's creating your reality, and there is a law of cause and effect. And if your cause is there's no rain, your effect is going to be no fucking rain. But if your cause is I love you, God, thanks for the rain, or however you want to put it, I love you, universe, thanks for the rain, I know that this rain is ours and that everything's right and my family's fed and it's done. It's a done deal. And I am genuinely grateful because I recognize that can be true, and that's the energy that does it. Gratitude and love. You can have anything you want. You just have to believe it. So, just expect the best unfailingly. It's the best advice that, really anybody can give you. Expect the best unfailingly, no matter what opposition you come up against, no matter how many times the thing, and you can make an adjustment because of this opposition and that opposition. Make adjustments, but never change your fucking perspective. Never stop being an idealist. Just because one thing didn't work one time doesn't mean it won't work another time. Even though if it didn't work that one time, it might mean that now's not the best time to do that. And there might mean that there's a better way to do the thing. And try to always lead by your inspiration and be open and don't get hung up on the one way you've decided to do the thing. There's other ways. You got to be open. So these are the deeper, nuanced levels of all these universal laws that I'm teaching you. And as you put together all of this information, you'll be able to sort of grasp more deeply how to vibe to what you want. But honestly, if you can just goofily, stupidly be a unfailing idealist, let everybody around you go, you will eventually create a utopia around you. My dad has a tattoo that says, never let the bastards wear you down. I've got a tattoo that says positive mental attitude. My dad used to say POS, or PMS, positive mental I know, PMA, sorry. PMS. Sorry, my dyslexia coming out. Let's see. Good in every bad person, origin of concept, what you believe you achieve. I was explaining, the origin of the universe. It's all concept. It's all a mind becoming conscious of itself. First, on the other side of things, through splitting, and then through creating various forms of itself, so that it can then create other forms of itself to go explore itself and know itself. Essentially, is what's going on here. What do you want to be possible? Yeah, what do you want to be possible? Don't limit the possibilities. And, the butterfly effect. The possibilities are endless, and the things that can come to you are endless. And messages from the other side can come to you endlessly. In the future, we'll do an episode on synchronicity. But the butterfly effect, the smallest thing can cause major shifts down the line. And this is how the higher realms can and do affect your reality, to communicate with you and to do things for you, to set things up. A very subtle fucking wind shift can, knock over a thing that leads to somebody thinking about something that they weren't going to think about otherwise, because they weren't going to notice. Bless me. They weren't going to notice something that they weren't going to notice otherwise, whatever else. Bringing things to your attention through bringing things to your attention in patterns is what they call synchronicity. Seeing 11:11 a lot and whatnot. This is the other side trying to communicate with you, trying to get you through your intuition to look at the clock, to whatever, trying to guide you that they're there. And there are lots of ways that this is going on. But beyond that, that butterfly effect, that same butterfly effect, can ultimately be used to bring anything to you, anything that you think is possible. And if you're just kind of empty-headed and you haven't bothered to think about the possibilities, whatever, you can get all sorts of things. But if you start thinking about the limitations become your reality. You create a world of limitation when you focus there. I'm focused on limitation. That's the reality I create. So what sort of reality do you want to create for yourself? Balance. Things start out balanced when you come into the universe, as like a baby or whatever. Granted, you may be triggered in various directions from previous lives. When you get in there, I've seen it happen with my own kids. They polarize in different ways when certain things happen to them. And minor things, but you would see shifts in them. They would sort of be reminded how they felt about a thing. But in general, you're starting off balanced, and then you adjust. So case in point, I can remember my son Cassidy. I was a little bit too rough with him. I don't remember what he did. He definitely deserved it, but he had done something messed up, and I overreacted a little bit more, and I was a little bit more harsh with him. And I don't remember if I I usually don't hit my kids or anything, but might rough them up if they're roughing me up, if they're hitting me in the face, or if they're doing something, because sometimes your kids will be violent and they'll hurt you, and I try to, sort of equalize, that a little bit of hey, buddy, remember what you're dealing with here. I'm a big person too. I could be doing that, but I'm not doing that. So you got to meet me halfway. I'm communicating with you. You got to communicate with me. But anyway, in this moment with my son, he polarized into I don't like when people are tough with me, too rough with me. And I saw it. He really closed down with me in a major way. And I adjusted my parenting style with him immediately. And I saved our relationship because I knew actually that I really kind of fucked up things with him in that moment, because he couldn't be parented that way. He would take it the wrong way. He really took it as an affront against him to be sort of absconded about or whatever. I think also too that moment helped him to be a little bit less handsy as well, because he did learn that he didn't like it. So obviously he didn't want to do it to other people on some level, or if he was doing it to other people, he was doing something to other people that he didn't like, right? So, perhaps the lesson that I needed to teach him anyway, but I adjusted my parenting style with him, was much softer with him after that, and have fixed things. Now, he's going to go through his life, and he's going to have to find balance again to where he started, where, he could sort of take that as a little bit less of an affront, because it is going to happen in the world, and he doesn't want to have like a grudge against people the way he was about to have a grudge against his own dad for being a little rough with him in that moment. You know, if he goes out into the world and every single little kind of scuffle, whatever, or like harsh words that he has between somebody, he can't get over it, and he's bang, bang, bang with them. Well, you know, it's like that. Sometimes the best friendships come out of fights and conflicts and stuff. So, you know, the balance thing, to be a little bit less judgy of this thing and who knows what might come of our initial conflict or whatever, is where you want to be. So right now, he's in this overcorrection of I'm against it. Now, not everybody will go through all of these pieces, but I like to draw this like little kind of interesting star of a severity line where there's, you know, sort of a polarity, as we've talked about. There's the I am really, really against this. The opposite side, I'm really, really for this. Then a lesser, I'm against this, but not really, really against it, just a little against it. And then I'm for it. And various degrees of just saying more, a little less, a lot less, even less than that, you know. And then, but somewhere in the middle, though, is this balance between these two things that you're kind of going back and forth against. And he will end up changing his personality at one point or another, and he'll shift to the other side. Some people sometimes will make a violent shift, and all of a sudden, they're on the other side. No, you know, I love that now. I really like this kind of thing. You know, I realized I was scared of this before, but I really like this thing now. And now they're like overdoing it. But now the overdoing it teaches them a whole bunch of the things that they didn't like about the thing. And now they end up going back to, well, you know, I liked it. And I understand I have appreciation for it for now. I'm back to not really approving of it, but I have an appreciation of why other people appreciate it. So, you know, I'm not so against it as I was. And then maybe at a certain point they go, you know, I kind of want that back in my life. And they put it back in their life in a way, but again, a little too much. And then finally somewhere they reconcile this balance, you know, like an alcohol could be like a good thing. No, I don't do any alcohol. No, I would love to. You know, a glass of wine every now and then is okay, and I enjoy having that. Aha, what have we arrived at? We've arrived at our balance. So, you know, that's always what we're looking for. And this cause and effect is really playing in there as we go back and forth from where you start is ultimately going to teach you a whole bunch of lessons. That's going to lead you to where you polarize. You could polarize in a thing where you slowly shift from being super into the thing to I do it less to I don't do it at all anymore. You know, and in fact I'm really against it. And you know what? I think there are some people who do it better than I did it, and I'm in the balance, and I don't drink, but you know, there's all sorts of ways to arrive at that balance. Getting to the end of this thing here. Little too little, just right. Okay, yeah. Success comes from detachment. So, you know, the last thing that I really want to talk about here, and like there's a big thing that I talk about in the YouTube videos, which is why I recommend them. I talk a little bit about, you know, tarot pathways and, you know, different causes and effects that exist within sort of some of these ancient schools of philosophy with some of the flower of life and colors, and I am looking at various notes that I have there, and you can hear about some of that stuff if you want to check it out. But it's kind of, you know, it's kind of loosely part of cause and effect, and I wanted to teach it, so I just kind of shoved it in at that bit, but it doesn't necessarily fall into everything that I want to talk about today, mainly, you know, with the prayer and whatnot. So beyond prayer, there is another very useful tool to get what you want, which is often a lot better, and that is detachment. Most of the success that I have had in my life has come from detachment. Even something I realize right now, when I won a lot of awards when I was writing in high school for a class I did called the Independent Writing for Publication. And it kind of struck me as odd, actually, because I've struggled in my success as a writer, the way I want to have it, and I've had a lot of success as a writer, which I'll talk to you about in a second, but the way what I was looking for, what I was trying to achieve, seemed to elude me, and I wanted it very much, and as I was trying to write and do things, I had some desire for writing, for not writing, for achievement, to find out that I was good. But I think actually the miracle of Mrs. Krinsky's class, her independent writing for publication class, she famously had, I don't know, at least 2-3 dozen writing contests from all around the country that she would enter us into all year long. So there was just so many contests. You'd eventually, forget all about it. And you'd be able to attract in the positive things, because I've learned when you think too much about the thing, you end up fucking it up. I cared so much about my music career. I cared so much about my career as a comic book writer. Those two things mattered to me like you would not believe, and I put so much work and so much effort and so much diligence into their pursuit. And I'm here to tell you, has been my least success. The things that I love the most. Even something like this podcast, which to some degree I've put the least amount of effort into. I had an opportunity come my way, and I went, okay, I have a lot of things to say, and I have been feeling like I'd like to be a part of the conversation in a real way, and and that began me with doing the Cool Geek Alive podcast, and I liked the podcast format. I was enjoying it, so I kept doing it, and it was making me money, and on we go, which is very similar to all my other biggest success stories. I'm a pretty successful host. I've been the host of lots of TV shows, and whether it's online stuff or TV stuff, lots of TV stuff as well, and that came through no effort of my own. I've never really had a big desire to be on camera, even though I'm a musician. That didn't really come with wanting to be on camera. My dad's a live performer. He's a brilliant live performer. I would see him and what he did, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to help people feel good and have that sort of experience. It wasn't about being on camera, but I was discovered, I guess, for lack of a better word, at a party by an agent who said, basically, I could get you a lot of work. Would you be willing to go on some auditions for me? And I said, yeah, sure. I was in bands at the time, and I had a pretty rock and roll look or whatever. And I got sent on a ton of hosting things for lots of music stuff. And I was very quickly up for 3 different major things: Headbangers Ball, You Pick Live, and hosting MTV2. And I ended up getting hosted. I ended up getting hired to host for MTV2, and then for years I was a host. I hosted for AOL Music's Top 11 Countdown. I hosted for HBO and Fuse and a whole bunch of different places. PlayStation's Core, plenty of things after I switched into voiceover. But at a certain point, I knew that a lot of my father's success was because of his raspy voice from singing in rock clubs and stuff, and I had kind of developed a very similar raspy voice. I spoke a lot like him, and it was a very famous thing because he was doing voiceovers and as a celebrity voice and having a lot of success. That they say, "Get me D. Snider." This is the 5 stages of your career. Get me D. Snider. Get me a D. Snider. Get me a young D. Snider. No, wait. Get me, what is it? No, it starts out, who's D. Snider? Get me D. Snider. Get me a D. Snider. Get me a young D. Snider. And who's D. Snider? So I was like, I could be the young D. Snider. Because again, I was making money in the hosting world. I was struggling to make more money in music. Even though I've made great music, I've made great comic books, I've been published by Marvel, been published by DC. But the success that I was desiring there to be able to write consistently and pay my bills as a comic book writer, and be paying my bills as a musician, I wasn't quite doing that yet. Especially I was getting ready to have a family. I was married and kids on the way, kind of thing. So I tried voiceovers, and very quickly I was a massive success. I'm one of the most successful voiceover actors in my age bracket in America. You've heard my voice a million times, and you've never known it. For years, as the voice of Pizza Hut. Want more taste? Get America's favorite pizza. Pizza Hut, now online. I was GameStop, and I was Cheetos, and the Metropolitan Opera, and once on Broadway, and tons of fucking promos for TV stuff, and I have books on tape, and just every matter of voiceover I have done, and tons of commercial stuff, very big commercial shit, which just have run on mainstream television all the time, constantly, so people end up hearing them. Was it 2.5 years Pizza Hut and 4.5 years Kia Motors, which was buying a Kia is one smart move. Voiceovers paid my bills. When I woke up at 29 and I came into alignment with reality, with the idea that I was creating my own reality, is there any evidence that that's true? Well, let me look back a second. And let me look at how my detachment from voiceover and hosting led to massive success. And my overcorrection of passion and work ethic on music and comic books has led to stagnation and frustration. I'm putting in too much effort, and then the universe isn't rewarding my too much effort. And then I'm starting to feel like I'm not getting anything back in return. And I'm starting to project onto the universe. The universe isn't giving me anything back in return. I'm not achieving the success that I want to achieve. I start putting up all these walls. Now, all these careers even become like sort of trigger points for me, where I put up all of these walls of this doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and this doesn't work. I'm literally creating a world where nothing's possible for me. It's not possible for me to be a success as a musician because of some silly hang-up I have about my father being a rock star, or not wanting to eclipse him, a fear of success. It needing to be done a very certain way so that no one can say that I rode my father's coattails. That's a big one. Controlling the outcome. The things that have to happen in order for it to rain, or in order for you to get money, or whatever, like, don't get involved. You don't know. Money could fall from the sky. Somebody could be doing a money drop, and it's supposed to be on a field, but this guy's disoriented, and somehow his GPS is wrong, and a giant bag of money just lands straight square in the back of my fucking backyard. Anything that could happen can happen. Now, this isn't to say that I recommend you sit there trying to, imagine that into existence, and, oh, God already gave me that thing. Again, we don't have to be so specific. Seeing your family fed, and even if the rain thing was too subtle, granted, rain is what is required, when it comes to crops. So, but when it comes to more specific things, don't rely upon the traditional way in which you believe something like that would get to you. I believe that, I'm about to arrive at my happily ever after. It is not remote. It is not a road that looked like it would be that for me. That is not what the road looked like to me. And the entire time I was on it, I went, I know that this is the road to my happy ever after, but it doesn't look like it, and it's scaring the shit out of me. But I kept coming back around. I know this is the road to my happily ever after. I know this is the road I have to take. And I'm right. And I know I'm right. And all the things and signs and whatnot have been working out as I've moved down the road that I normally wouldn't have taken. But once I opened myself up to the guidance to find that path, to get to my balance, to be the cause and effect, to get that rain dance going. Last week I talked about God sending 2 boats and a helicopter in that great joke. You know, I prayed for God to save me, and he sent me 2 boats and a helicopter. I didn't know that they were sent from God, but ultimately, through the butterfly effect, the universe, God, is always capable of sending you all manner of things. Rain and money and people, opportunities. And then you have to take that inspired action, like we talked about last time, to get what you desire. Anyway, I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening this long. Really appreciate you guys sharing this show around with your friends and your family and anybody who you think might be open to the ideas. I like to think that I'm putting these concepts into terms that everybody can understand and hopefully get behind, so we can start to get on the same page about the nature of our mental reality. Because like I said, guys, I'm not trying to, school you on my philosophy. Circumstances have alerted me to reality. And the reality is we're making this thing. We're making this thing together. And we need to get all of our minds right so that we can start making something better together tomorrow. I hope you guys will join me again next Friday for another fucking awesome episode of Everything They Don't Want You to Know. I'm Jesse Blaze Snider, and I love you. Join me next time. Peace.